Welcome to the front yard of our house. When we were shopping around, one of the selling points of this house was all the deck space and especially the covered deck. It was covered in ice and snow when we bought it, but now that it's summertime, we're hanging out on the deck as much as possible. It's pretty obvious that quite some time has passed since the last time this thing has received any TLC. There are a few loose balusters and wobbly rails that make for a small safety concern, not to mention the whole thing is in desperate need of a fresh coat of paint. With the help of Wagner, the sponsor of this video, my wife and I are going to spruce this thing up so we can continue to enjoy it for the rest of the summer and into the fall. Phase 1 is a very thorough, deep tissue cleaning of the entire surface. We used a pressure washer to blast off every bit of dirt, peeling paint, and mold that we could. This can be a particularly dirty task, especially in close proximity to walls and a ceiling, since there's really no place for the splashback to escape. I very cleverly informed my wife, Katie, that I needed to get a bunch of action shots on film in order to make this video for you lovely viewers. That meant she had to do all the work while I stayed clean and dry and out of the spray. It's okay though, she doesn't watch these videos so she'll never know.
Nope, she'll never know.
Fun fact, all these little rocks are actually treasures my kids found mixed in among the landscaping. They called them crystal rocks, I guess because they had little sparkly bits that most rocks don't have. I learned this well after we cleaned the deck and just blew the rocks off the sides with the pressure washer. Eventually, the kids noticed and gave us a very sad-faced scolding for not being more careful. We had to make sure the deck was very thoroughly dry before moving on to painting. Due to some rainstorms, it was nearly 2 weeks before that happened. In the meantime, we stayed off the deck as much as possible to keep it clean, but I did take the time to fix some of the wobbly railing issues. You can see here that there's really nothing of substance holding the bottom rail post in place since the stringer is cracked in multiple places along the grain. To stiffen this up, I screwed a block of wood to the outside. This in itself didn't add much strength, but it created a solid spot to add a board across the entire front face of the lowest stair tread. That part did add a ton of rigidity. Unfortunately, the footage of that piece being installed has gone missing. Apparently, the evil tripod has upped his game from bad camera angles to deleting footage. If this looks a little unsightly, I agree with you. This fix is part of our short-term solution. We need this deck to last just a few more years because our ultimate goal is to rip this one out and the side deck and then rebuild a much nicer wraparound deck around this whole corner and side of the house. But that's a project for much further down the line. When painting day finally came around, I swept the place as clean as I could, then followed that up with a leaf blower to get anything I missed. Next came the task of masking off all of the places that I didn't want covered with brown paint. Some people have the patience and steady hands that it takes to cut into all these corners and edges with a paintbrush. Katie is one of those people, and I am very much not. When it comes to painting, I slap it on as quick and thick as possible. So instead, I spend most of my time on masking. I started by running a single line of tape that perfectly separated the deck from the house. Next, I came back with plastic sheeting and hung it so the bottom edge overlapped the tape at the base by roughly an inch. Finally, I would completely seal off the bottom edge of the plastic by taping it to the original tape line. Working alone, I used smaller chunks of plastic so they were easier to manage, but if I had help, I could have saved some time by using bigger sheets. With all the prep work done, I used the leaf blower one last time to make sure my work surface was as clean as possible. Finally, the painting can begin, and this is where Wagner comes in. I used Wagner's Flexio 5000 paint sprayer for this project, and it did a killer job. The tool comes neatly organized in a case, and the coolest part is the case itself is the heart of the operation. Just pick which size sprayer you need, then pull the hose and power cord out. Plug the sprayer into the case and the case into an outlet and you're off to the races. I filled up the paint hopper, then did a little practicing. I set this old door up as a barricade to keep the kids and dog off the deck while the paint dries. Turns out it only kind of worked, but I'll get into that later. The plan was to paint all the balusters from the inside, then paint the flat deck itself. This was super easy to do because you could adjust the direction and size of the spray pattern on the fly. On the balusters, I was using a much more focused pattern, so I didn't lose too much paint to overspray into the yard. Then on the decking, it was wide open and just hose the place down. We also found the most efficient method to use on the square but decorative balusters was to focus our fire on each of the corners, doing the same corner on every one in one direction, then doing the next corner on the way back, then repeating the process once we switched to the outside. The Flexio 5000 can sure move a lot of paint. I figure it took me about an hour and a half to mask off this entire deck, and it only took an hour to paint every square inch of it. If you have a bunch of painting in your future, make sure you check this thing out. I'll leave a link in the description for you. We decided to only paint one of the decks at a time. That way we always had a way in and out of the house. I figured this ugly barricade would be enough of a reminder to stop Flint or my kids from climbing up there while the paint was wet. Well, that was an absolute failure. Remember when I used it as a spot to test the sprayer? Only seconds later, the boys came out of the house, walked right up to that odd little wall in the yard, and just had to touch it. Then, my youngest, who doesn't like dirty hands, immediately wiped the paint off on his butt. And Flint? Well, he was much worse. He squeezed his head between the door and the bottom rail post, pushing it out of the way, then climbing up to his favorite spot to sleep. Then, I added weight so the barricade wouldn't move, so he just jumped over the door. Next, I added a second door and made it too tall for him to jump, yet I still found him sleeping up there. The only clue to what had happened were these claw marks in my new paint. He came in from underneath the steps and clawed his way through that little opening. You win, Flint. Enjoy your nap. At least by this point the paint was dry, but those little claw marks will always be a reminder of how I was outsmarted by my dog. Well, there it is, guys, a freshly painted deck. Took about 2 days worth of work, 1 day to clean it, a week to let it dry, and then 1 more day to mask it and paint it, and then it was all done. I want to say a huge thank you to Wagner for supporting this video. I've used a couple of their products now, and they have a great line of stuff to help you out with projects like this. So there's a link down in the description. Go check it out if you've got some painting coming up. Anything I forgot, guys? No? We lost Flint. So he's saying it's time to go. So we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.
See ya.
Thanks.
See ya. Thanks. Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Clickety clack, clickety clack.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Mr.
Bye.
Clicksters.
Bye. Bye. Bye.